The support. All right, another game. Let's see what we get. Got the white pieces. How should we start? Hey, base guy. That's true. It's true. We played d4 lately, so I think it's time for at least an e4 game. But how should we play e4? It depends, right? We might get e5, might get c5. Those have been very common. Honestly, the Scandinavian has been incredibly common as well. Will we get a move at all? I think that's the main question. All right, e5. How should we play now? What are we feeling? A lot of options. I'll play knight c3. I'll listen to the chat. I saw Vienna in there. Let's make one person happy. And that person is Tommy Fukin Shelby. Tommy, fine. I'll play this opening. You ask for it all the time, so fine. I'll do it. Knight c3, and you know the point of knight c3 is that knight f6 gets met with f4. I could still go f4 after d6, but I definitely think it's a lot worse. So let's bring the bishop out now. And if knight here, knight f3, I was thinking like there might be knight takes e4 there, but that looks that looks a little suspicious. I don't think that works. Black can't really play d6 and then d5 again and expect it to be okay. So I think we can get away with knight f3 here. d3 though is, I would say, more standard in terms of the opening, which kind of wants to play the move f4. But I like I think I like knight f3. One thing about knight f3 that I'm thinking here is knight f3, bishop g4, and how to continue from there. h3, of course, bishop h5. Maybe just d3. Yeah, we could definitely do that. d3 and then go for g4. But I think I'm between d3 and knight f3 right now. d3 has the, you know, the idea to play f4, which I think is a little bit more standard for the Vienna. So I think I'm probably going to do that, even though, and knight f3 is a great move here. I just think that when people play the Vienna, they're kind of like ready to play f4 in every variation. So d3, knight c6. Well, I definitely think f4 is tempting. f4, bishop g4 though. Knight f3, knight d4. It's like, ooh. Let's make sure we're able to handle that. I'm a little bit tempted by h3 here, I'm not gonna lie. f4, bishop there, knight e2. Also, I think just makes sense as well. So I think I'll probably do that. Knight f3 feels wrong because of knight d4, so I think I'll start with f4 and then go knight e2 with bishop g4. The other thing is, usually you get this line, e4, e5, let's say knight, no, yeah, knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, and black wants to play knight a5 to take the bishop. Knight a5, and you go like knight e2, but that all happens without this knight here. So I think it's still okay to do this, knight a5, and then bring the bishop back. But I guess you could also play a3 here. I'm gonna stick with what I would say is standard fare and go f4. But honestly, I think knight a5 is a major consideration. Yeah, knight f3 I don't love because of knight d4, so I am more drawn to the move knight e2 as a result. And at least knight d4, I have this other knight supporting, so now I can basically play moves like h3, I can castle here, and the goal is to take and play bishop g5, and have the rook there, the pin, all this stuff. So black's played some very reasonable moves so far. And I was wondering what he was going to do here, whether he's going to keep developing or get tempted to take. Taking's a fine move. If I take with the queen, then I'm assuming knight to d4 is going to happen. If I go queen f2, then knight g4, and I'm really running out of squares to be able to defend c2, so I'm definitely going to be careful there. But after knight d4, I think I can retreat to d1, no problem, and I'm going to castle next. So knight going backwards doesn't seem to make much sense because I like the knight on c3, and I think I can play queen takes. Queen e3, big mistake. Queen d2 is not a bad move, but it does look weird blocking the bishop, so I'm going to retreat here. This also watches the g4 square, and I want to get castled next. I feel a little exposed with the possibility of queen h4 just sort of out there in the world. But I love the idea of castling. My bishop and rook line up on the f7 square. I'm feeling good about that in general. Good move, c6 by black. b5 looks like a dangerous move, and there's queen b6, which will eyeball my king as soon as I castle. So c6 is very crafty. Very crafty. Let's have a think here. Taking is very tempting. We could also castle first, and basically after b5, yeah, I'm just gonna step back to b3, I think. So how are we gonna be getting ready for b5, bishop b3, a5? That's what I'd like to know. That's what I would like to know. Because if that happens, the only way to save my bishop then becomes a4, and then the knight takes, and that looks, ugh, yuck. Don't like having to take that. So b5, a5 looks pretty convincing, I'm not gonna lie. I think it may be time for me to play a3 or potentially a4. I kind of like a3 better. And tuck my bishop away on a2. So, if I do want to tuck my bishop away, I'm going to have to deal with queen b6. And am I ever going to get castled there? It's a bit of a scary thought. Like, what if I play this whole game and somehow I'm not allowed to castle? It's going to be, that's going to be very awkward. If I take here, I don't think it really changes anything about the game. In fact, it only allows the bishop to show up there. So I gotta be honest, not only do I think black's play makes a lot of sense so far, I think I might be tempted into a move like a4 to try to play a5 against queen b6. Even though I want to play a3 to keep control over b4 a little bit, I think I might be tempted into a4 here. Let's have one more think and see if we can get away with a3. I really want to play a3. Normally, if I have like light squared bishop, I want to make sure I'm controlling my dark squares. Light squared bishop's the one he doesn't have. I don't really need more pawns on light squares. Dark squares are going to get weak as a result. Yeah, I don't think so, honestly. I'm really bothered by this move. I think I'm going to do this. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay, I might make open up the playbook and call an audible here because I think we're gonna make a game time decision. Big audible call. I think we might do it. This has risky written all over it, but I'm ready. Let's take. Very concerning. Then play a3 and allow both of these pieces to get there, potentially. I want to go a3 and knight e2. And we're gonna, likely regret it immediately, but this is the plan. a3, knight e2. Knight e2 I don't love as a move. It's very slow. I'm not even castled yet. So I think I'm risking a lot here. Bishop e3, for example, there's knight takes c2. So I really don't like it that much, but believe it or not, I'm going to play knight e2 in this position. Could go knight a4, but doesn't make sense because b5 is there. So I've saved my bishop. I've done that part, but I think it's time for knight e2 now. Boy, this looks scary. But this is my game time decision. The thing about white's position is if the game just kind of continues relatively normally and nothing bad happens to my king or anything like that, then white's position will be better because this bishop is quite literally one of the best pieces on the board. a3, so it's going to be there the entire game. Let's take this. Pawn takes is really wrong, so he definitely wants to keep controlling the diagonal. So that's definitely the best move. Could have been queen takes, but I wasn't going to allow anything to happen there. Okay, so now this queen needs to move. Again, we're not getting castled, but I was thinking about queen f3, rook f1, stuff like that. And we have c3 always to boot the bishop out of there. So let's do this one. B5, I think we'll just step back. A6 might be the first move that I can say might be a little bit wrong. Feels like it. I'm looking at bishop g5 and I'm liking the prospects over there. Yeah, so the first thing I think I want to do is c3. Just so that I can actually move this piece with confidence. So let's do this. b5, we can always save the bishop. So this guy will have to retreat somewhere. Bishop c5 doesn't make the most sense. Don't think I'll necessarily play b4 straight away, but it's an option. Okay, so this is spicy. After this, if I take on e5, you know, that gets a little bit interesting, but it's really not something I'm considering almost at all here because I just love the bishop on this diagonal, so I'm not giving it up for anything. I am not giving it up. I think it's time for bishop here. Do we want to go to a2 for any reason? I'm not sure. I'm just going to make the simple move. Bishop g5, and if the pawns get doubled there, white's position, I think, starts to get really, really good. This pawn is covered for the moment. We'll go for this pin. And my king can castle long, but also, you know, rook f1 is going to put immense pressure here because the knight can't move. It's not only pinned to the f7 pawn, but it's pinned to the queen now. So for many reasons, I think bishop g5 is quite good. But this bishop it's been dominating the entire game. I made a game time decision to go for a3 as I wanted to, not a4, and keep my dark squares controlled by the pawns, and then my light squares controlled by the bishop. So that's like the best combo you can have. Queen d6, if I go rook f1, I'm thinking to myself, maybe the knight can move, and although I take f7, I'm not sure that I want to be stuck in that pin. So he plays queen e7, which does not get out of the pin. That means I think rook f1 is a pretty good looking move. The other thing I'm thinking of, though, is rook f1, he's probably going to go there. And then if I take, all of a sudden, I'm not even doubling the pawns. So for that reason alone, I'm going to make sure to take now and definitely double these pawns. If he takes like this, I feel like that's a little bit wrong because now the queens stay on the board, and I'm not actually sure why he would want the queens to remain on the board here. That seems very favorable to me. So let's go rook f1 just to make a threat here. Yeah, this looked really, really wrong. If you're ever going to take like bad pawns in front of your king, you almost always want to say, okay, you can have the good pawns, but I'm going to have to get the queens off the board there, my friend. Gonna have to trade the queens on you. It's looking like a castling angle. Rook d8 is a very interesting move because he's trying to say, okay, I see your threat, I've got my own. And it's reasonably convincing. There's rook takes c6 in the end. So I do get the feeling that, that white is just better there. Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good position, honestly, for white. So I'm probably gonna go for that. The other option would be maybe to, I don't know, castle to defend this, but then he's gonna defend that. So I think we just go for capturing, because after rook c6, I'll be attacking the bishop as well. I think this is a good trade for me. Long castling looks like a great move, but I don't know. I just feel like all black's pawns are going to disappear in this variation. Rook takes d3, rook takes c6, and the bishop is hanging. The pawn behind it is hanging. I get a good feeling about this position. But he should definitely still take on d3. Like, my pawns are all connected here. Losing this pawn definitely disconnects things and causes some disarray. Bishop doesn't have great squares. Like, you know, the bishop goes here, rook takes a6, hits it again. These squares are off limits. Bishop e3 can be played, but king e2 hits both pieces. Bishop g1, king e2 also hits both pieces. It's like some of these moves maybe can be played, but they definitely look really weird. Lots of hanging pawns, but still don't really get the feeling that you're completely winning until you establish. You need like a position where you're done dealing with threats and you can actually evaluate. For now, it's like I still felt like things were up in the air with bishop g1 and like king e2, rook e3. Bishop e3, I must say, I'm very happy to see, because king e2, I think he's just missed it, honestly. King e2 should win the game. If the bishop moves, then I take the rook, and if the rook moves, I take the bishop. And if rook d8, which doubles the rooks, and it looks great, I believe I can play bishop d5, and now this will disconnect black's rooks from one another and renew the threat of taking one of these pieces. So bishop d5 to me seems game over. Rook is trapped, actually. Rook d2, king e3, and you know the bishop moves, you lose the rook, so a bit of an awkward configuration. Rook takes d5, pawn takes, rook takes, loses the bishop. And I guess rook takes and e4 is the only way to like keep the rook on d3. But white also has a very easy win there, which is just rook d1. It forces the trade of rooks, and I have rook against bishop, which is a really easy win. So a very good game kind of comes to an abrupt end here, because I don't see how he's going to avoid heavy material loss. Yeah, rook d2 can, I mean, it can pick up one pawn in the sense that once you take one of these, let's say you take g2, yeah, you're attacking 2 pawns, but white is going to immediately go on the counter attack. Rook f1, rook c7, rook f6, rook takes a6. So you're not really going to get more than 1 pawn, and you're probably going to get close to mated there. So it's maybe the best option for black, but it's very lost. I'll be very interested after the game to see what the engine thinks of my decision to play a3 and knight e2, because it keeps my structure so beautiful, so perfect, and I keep my light squared bishop. All great things, but it seemed very slow. It seemed like he was developing, getting his pieces out, and I was like trying to have this beautiful position. So it seemed a little artificial. He's having to think, as he should. Bishop d5 is kind of a nasty shot to miss. I don't think he'll find too much at his avail here, but he may land on this, which would be a good find. But both options, this or rook d2, all seem to give white an overwhelming position. So king f3 keeps things really well defended, and black only got 1 pawn there. But we could also just switch to the offensive with rook f1 or rook c7 or something. I'm gonna say that losing these pawns is annoying enough that it's worth defending. So I'm gonna go king f3. Protect it. Seems really simple. I think if he took my g2 pawn, then I would have played rook f1 and gone for this stuff. But now we're threatening this. We're also threatening rook c7. I think rook c7 now is the move. If I take, I don't know if I want to deal with f5, although I'm noticing that f5, there's rook f6. So that is kind of nice. But no, I think the priority is this pawn. So rook c7 is very appealing. Over rook f6, because then rook d7. I don't want to get sidetracked though and like let the king come out, the rooks slide over. It seems unnecessary. Let's immediately make a threat that doesn't have a good answer. This pawn is not too important, because look, I win this pawn and my pawn still can't push, right? So it'll be a long time before I get a working pass pawn. Instead, let's make a real threat here. Rook takes f7. And my other rook is about to play rook f1 and finally join the action. If I can play rook here and keep the king on the back rank, that will be very good for me. What I wasn't keen on earlier was playing rook c7, because then black would play maybe king g7, king g6, and go up the board. So at least now, black's wasted time going like that. So if they play king g7, I would basically get king f3 as a move for free. It's an extra move for me. Doesn't have a good option here, honestly. I'm not sure what I would do. Maybe king e8 I would try. Hoping for rook takes f7, rook takes d5. Cheapo. But obviously white can take with the bishop if they want. Or just go rook f1. But that's what I would do. Hope for a cheapo. Not the worst way to play. You're down a piece anyway, so you kind of have to hope for a mistake. Okay, let's take this, I think. We could go with rook f1, though. That's the only other move I'm thinking, and it honestly looks really good. Mainly because rook d3 check, king e2 traps the rook, and I really think that's going to get played. Even if it doesn't, I'm still threatening this, and he still doesn't have an answer for it. f5, I think now king e3 to hit the rook and threaten rook f5 may be pretty much the end of the game. Yeah, I think that's pretty much GG. So king e3, hit the rook, and threaten rook takes f5. f4 check doesn't help out. Rook takes pawn, I take here, and after king e8, you're losing basically everything. Yeah, I think you have to play rook takes pawn here. I mean, you could play rook takes bishop, maybe, which actually may be the best move, but rook takes pawn makes the most sense. However, now the king is trapped, only has one move. Bishop c6 after king there would almost be mate, but there's rook d7. But I think we are going to start after king here by taking this pawn, because the only move that black can do is king back, and then we'll return and then go bishop there. And we get an extra pawn out of it, so it seems worth it. So king here, we have rook f5 and bishop c6. We also have rook f7, king g8, and then, you know, rook f2, for example. So which way wins a rook in a better way? That's what I want to know. But I think it's bishop c6 still. Yeah, I mean, this is tempting, obviously, but this is so strong. I just can't say no to it. Rook d7, and then instead of bishop takes, which lets the king maybe briefly escape, I'm going to take with the rook. Notice that black has pawns on the board, so there's no situation where you try to sack your rook and make a draw, because this is a stalemate position. That's why I mentioned that. But yeah, I think we should have a mate coming up here. I'm trying to think of exactly where it is. Where is that mate that I'm speaking about? I'm talking about it like it's right there in front of me, but it's not right there in front of me. Maybe here, but of course, taking with the rook makes the most sense. I just want to force the king to walk in that direction in order to get the mate on the last rank. There we go. That should be it. I'm not gonna get sidetracked here. Side quest, rook takes rook. No, let's stick with the main quest. Checkmating the king and playing rook f8. Very good game by my opponent, in my opinion. I thought he played tremendously. It's like came down to that big blunder, in my opinion, bishop e3. It was a huge mistake. But I thought bishop g1 there was still kind of struggling for him. I think he played really well. I'd be very interested to see how it looked. Because I think my opening was shaky in the sense that I was trying to be too perfect. And although I don't think I made any big mistakes, I do think that he had a few better options available. So we can take a look. So yeah, here we play f4. It's the, this is the Vienna. You always go for this f4 move. And then after bishop g4, I'm not a fan of this knight f3 stuff because I'm going to have to take with my g-pawn after knight d4, right? I know this is some sort of line that you can do. But, black has, it's a little shaky for me. It's a little shaky. I don't like taking this way. So I'm not a fan of that, which is why I went knight e2. He took, and here, again, knight e2, engine likes instead of queen takes. I liked queen takes because I thought, I'll just go back to d1 and castle. But I actually didn't appreciate in this position how strong his move was. And his move that he came up with was knight d4 and c6. I thought this was very strong because if I castled normally, then I have to deal with b5 and a5. This is what I was talking about. Now, a4 is a crushing move, wins a piece. So it's like, how do I avoid losing a piece? I have to move this a pawn. It's the only thing I can do. But I don't like this. This doesn't feel good to me. So because I didn't like this, I didn't want to go for it. Engine says it's okay. I kind of disagree. I think this is a really bad situation to be in. So because I didn't want that to happen, well, what do I do about b5? I have to move my a pawn somewhere, right? Or I could take and then move my a pawn. So what did I do here? I decided to take. Not a bad move. But then again, if I castle, I'm getting hit with the same problems. So I played a3, and yeah, I did not like the move a4. I just knew that it was worse than a3. And after bishop c5, if I can't castle and I can't play bishop e3, what am I doing here? I have to play knight e2. Well, then I'd rather play a3 than a4. e5, I have that idea met. Bishop c5, and now I can't castle. If I play bishop e3, I get hit with knight c2, right? So there's none of this, there's none of this, which means the only idea is to play knight e2, which is what I did. Knight e2, he castles, and we made sure to take. Takes, and now queen f3, we're gonna get c3, we're gonna get bishop g5, rook f1, and I think our position starts to look very good. Honestly, he played the opening really well. I'm a little bit happy with the way that I chose to deal with this. Pawn takes here, a3 and knight e2. I think that audible that we called earlier was actually a very good one. Because white wants to keep this structure and keep the bishop. Now, a6, I think is definitely a bit of a soft move because if he wants to play b5, guess what? He can play it, right? It's right there for him. So that helps me out, I thought, because I play c3 and then I play bishop g5. So I was a big fan of this position. He plays here, and now I definitely knew that my position was good in the sense that rook f1 castle, there's going to be a big attack. However, I also knew that bishop takes f6 gave me a fantastic endgame. So the best play by him would be this. And even though the computer gives it an inaccuracy, I think this is really uncomfortable for black. White's position is so easy to play. 0 weaknesses. Yes, it's opposite bishops, but that weakness right there, I don't know. I would feel very, very confident playing this kind of endgame. So that's why I play bishop f6, because if rook f1, bishop d8, and although this is a good position for me, there's d4, there's pawns coming. It's a different style of game. So I wanted to take an advantage that was guaranteed, and this wasn't guaranteed. Right, this is a position where white's better, but it's double-edged. I wanted a position where I was better, and it's not double-edged. I might not be as, I might not be as better as I am here, but I'm better, and there's no risk. here I think there's still a risk. Black has an attack, you know, he's gonna make it messy. So I like the decision because now it's like up to me to do the outplaying. He takes with the pawn, which is unfortunate because I thought that was a mistake. Here, once again, we could castle and defend, but I was under the impression that taking here was giving me an advantage. And this was the last moment where I thought he had a good move, and you'll see that the engine likes it as well. Bishop G1. It looks like a blunder because of King E2. But King E2 itself is actually a blunder. Rook to E3. King E2, or sorry, King D2. And if I play King F1, it's silly because I have to play King D2 to keep hitting both pieces. And then what happens is he checks me, and although I can block it and it seems like I'm winning here, Black has this amazing move, Rook takes E4. And this is why I thought his Bishop G1 was still a very good move. And this is like a tricky, very tricky line. So I don't know. I was a little concerned after this move. I knew I was much better, but still, I think this keeps the fight alive a little bit. King E2 is not as good as it looks, even though it attacks two pieces at the same time. Yeah, this line is kind of nasty. So he plays Bishop E3. It's a huge mistake, and unfortunately, everything that we saw was pretty much exactly how it was going to happen. Yeah. Yep. Good game. He really did play the opening well. What I ended up finding there in the opening to kind of coordinate my pieces, I thought was really important to find because, first of all, knight e2 is important. And then here, it's not that clear. White needs to play like a3, knight e2. Probably in the order that I did it. And if you don't, I think it may just have been equal or something. What rating did chess.com think I played like? Oh, we got it. Real generous of them. 1550. Real generous.